Important, this webpage presents a personal memoir and consumer awareness guide. It is not legal or medical advice. Consult qualified professionals for decisions about care, treatment, patient rights, power of attorney, hospice, or end-of-life planning. This book is dedicated to my mother, a woman who deserved so much better than what she received in her final months of life. To every family who has ever sat in a hospital waiting room, terrified and unsure of what to do next, this is for you. You are not alone, and you are not powerless. She was born to live, not to be forgotten in a nursing home hallway. She made it to 76, 13 days after her birthday. I carry her with me every single day. Legal disclaimer. This book is a personal memoir and consumer awareness guide based entirely on first-hand experiences. All names of facilities that have been altered or omitted were done to protect the author from legal liability. The names of medical professionals used herein are those that appeared in medical records and personal documentation and are used for the purpose of truthful, factual reporting of events as they occurred. Nothing in this book constitutes legal or medical advice. The author is not a licensed attorney, doctor, or medical professional. Readers are encouraged to consult qualified professionals regarding their individual circumstances. The experiences shared here are real, and it is the author's sincerest hope that they help other families avoid the same tragedies. Facility names such as Genesis are used here for factual reporting purposes only and reflect documented public records, including lawsuits that are a matter of public record. The author assumes no liability for decisions made by readers based on this book. Introduction: Why I wrote this book. I never set out to write a book. I set out to take care of my mother. But somewhere between the hospital rooms and the nursing home hallways, between the negligent nurses and the doctors who barely showed up, I realized something: what my family went through was not unique. This happens every single day, in cities and towns all across this country, to families just like mine. My mother was a real person. She had a life, a history, a family who loved her. She had worked as a certified nurse's aide herself. She knew how the system was supposed to work. And yet, even with all of that knowledge, even with family advocating loudly on her behalf, she was neglected, mistreated, and in some cases, nearly killed by the very people who were supposed to be healing her. This book is the story I started writing back in 2017. An attorney told me to document everything, so I did. I took notes, I took photographs, I kept records. What you are reading now is the result of nearly a decade of wanting to share what I know, because knowledge is the only real protection you have when you or someone you love ends up in one of these places. If I can help even one family avoid what mine went through, then every word of this book is worth it. The things I witnessed: nurses ignoring alarms to read newspapers, staff hiding in empty rooms while patients soiled themselves, a doctor who wanted to amputate a leg that did not need to be amputated, a nurse who cursed under her breath at being asked to do her job. These are not exaggerations. These things happened. And they can happen to your family too if you don't know what to watch for. My mother passed away on December 19th at 9:14 p.m., 13 days after her birthday. She made it to 76. She deserved so much more. Read this book. Take notes. Ask questions. Fight for your loved one, because if you don't, nobody else is going to. Chapter 1. It starts with one doctor, the sciatic nerve incident. Before the brain tumor, before the nursing homes, before any of it, it started with a doctor who had just graduated from medical school and, in my opinion, didn't know enough yet to be trusted with my mother's care. My mother had been dealing with severe sciatic nerve pain. Her medication had stopped working, and the pain was becoming unmanageable. She went to the hospital, where they were able to give her a nerve-blocking injection, a shot that essentially blocked the nerve signal so she couldn't feel the pain. It worked. She felt relief for the first time in a long time. Then she went back to her regular doctor, and that is where things started to fall apart. This doctor, who had, as I said, just completed her medical training, prescribed my mother a medication that she turned out to be allergic to. Not only did it fail to help her, it made the situation significantly worse. This is one of the most basic failures a doctor can make, prescribing a medication without thoroughly reviewing a patient's allergy history. A newly graduated doctor is not automatically a bad doctor, but experience matters. Always ask how long your doctor has been practicing and whether a specialist should be involved in your care. So we ended up back at the hospital. The medical team there worked to manage the allergic reaction and stabilize her condition. But my mother had multiple disabilities and was significantly overweight, and some of the exercises required for physical rehabilitation were simply not possible for her to do safely. The hospital staff suggested transferring her to a nursing home for continued rehabilitation, but my mother refused outright. She did not want to go to a nursing home. As a compromise, they placed her in what was called a transitional care unit at a local hospital here in Butte, Montana. That was when the next round of problems began, and this time, they were far more serious. Chapter 2, the first hospital state, sleepless nights and negligent care. Hospitals are supposed to be places of rest and healing. What my mother experienced during her first extended hospital stay was anything but. She was in the hospital for approximately a month and a half, and I can tell you that rest was the last thing she got. The first major problem was her room assignment. They had placed another patient in the room with her, a very noisy person, which made sleep nearly impossible for my mother. Night after night, staff would come in and out of the room at all hours, and the noise from the other patient added to the constant disruption. By the time she was finally discharged, she was so exhausted she could barely function. Then there was the medication incident, one that I consider one of the most serious failures I witnessed during this entire ordeal. A nurse who was working with my mother simply did not read her chart properly. She administered a medication to my mother that caused her to go into a coma. She was unresponsive for 4 full days. My mother was in a coma for 4 days because a nurse didn't read her chart. I wanted that nurse fired. The doctor told me she was new and convinced me to back off. I should not have backed off. I want to be honest about something. I have thought about that decision many times since. When the doctor told me the nurse was new and asked me to give her a chance, I felt some sympathy. I understood that everyone is a beginner at some point. But the hard truth is this: if a nurse makes a mistake that severe early in her career and there are no consequences, she will make the same mistake again with another patient. Someone else could end up in a coma, or worse. I wish I had pushed harder. There was also a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, who came into my mother's room one day and informed her that she was going to be transferred to a nursing home. Just like that. No discussion. No consent. My mother said no. She made it very clear she did not want to go to a nursing home. We had to go directly to hospital administration to fight for her right to go home, which she was ultimately able to do. This is something every family needs to understand. You have the right to refuse a transfer to a nursing home. A CNA does not have the authority to make that decision for your loved one. Do not let staff tell you otherwise. Chapter 3, the Transitional Care Unit, when doctors almost kill. The Transitional Care Unit was supposed to be a middle ground, a step down from acute hospital care, but still a medically supervised environment where my mother could continue to receive treatment and physical therapy without being placed in a full nursing home. What happened instead was a series of medical decisions that put her life at serious risk. The first doctor assigned to her case put her on a medication that had absolutely nothing to do with the condition she was being treated for. I don't know if this was negligence, carelessness, or simply a doctor who wasn't paying close enough attention to his patients, but whatever the cause, it nearly killed her. We had to fight to get that doctor removed from her case. The doctor who replaced him was named Dr. Harnik Singh, and I want to give credit where it is due. He was one of the good ones. Dr. Singh took the time to talk to patients and their families. He reviewed the full history of a patient before making treatment decisions. He listened, genuinely listened, to what you had to say. In a world where that kind of attention seems increasingly rare in medical settings, he stood out. But even with a good doctor on her case, there were other staff who made it clear they did not appreciate family members who stayed involved and asked questions. I took charge of my mother's situation. I monitored what was happening. I asked questions when things didn't seem right. and it seemed like some of the staff resented it. The doctor told another family member that I was the only problem they had. I was the problem because I wouldn't let them do whatever they wanted. I later found out that doctors can receive financial incentives for keeping patients in nursing homes. That changed my entire perspective on what that comment really meant. Always be involved. Always ask questions. If the medical staff at a facility treat family advocacy as a problem, that tells you something important about how they operate when nobody is watching. Chapter 4, Back Home. And then back again, the knee injury. My mother was finally discharged and went home. But she was on strong medication, and she was utterly exhausted from weeks of disrupted sleep at the hospital. She came home and went to sleep. I called over to her house to check on her. Thank God my brother was there. She had fallen out of bed. Because of her size, when she fell, she had rolled and injured her knee. What we found was alarming. A very large blister had formed on her knee, filled with pus. Given her size and her inability to get herself up off the floor, we called the ambulance. Back at the hospital, and one of the nurses made the comment, with what I can only describe as a kind of grim humor, "You can't stay away from here for very long." I know it was meant as a joke. But when your mother is hurt and you are scared, the last thing you need is a hospital nurse joking about it. It was inappropriate, and it was a sign of the attitude that was present in parts of that facility. They admitted her to a room at the far end of the building. In winter. It was extremely cold in that room. And that night, the nurse assigned to watch her, a patient who was on medication that could potentially put her into a coma, shut the door and walked down the hallway to talk on her personal phone. She was not watching my mother. She was not doing her job. I walked out and found her. I went directly to the front desk and demanded she be reassigned. We did not want her anywhere near my mother's care. That request was honored, and the rest of the nursing staff treated her well from that point on. Then there was the surgeon. A doctor named Dr. Blavatsky was supposed to come and assess the wound on her knee immediately, because if there was any infection or damage, the window for treatment was important. He didn't show up for a week. By the time he arrived, the pus had drained on its own and the skin appeared normal from the outside. He looked at it and said she needed surgery because there was a hematoma inside. I looked at that knee myself, and it looked completely healed to me. I wondered how he could tell just by looking that surgery was necessary, but he was the doctor, and we trusted him. He performed the surgery and removed what he described as a significant amount of tissue from her knee. After the surgery, she needed a wound vacuum, a wound VAC, to help the site heal. And she was given a choice: go home, or go to a nursing home where they could monitor the wound VAC. My mother chose the nursing home. That was the beginning of a whole new nightmare. Chapter 5, Genesis Nursing Home, First Stay. The nursing home she was transferred to is called Genesis, located on Continental Avenue. We did not know at the time that this facility had been sued multiple times for negligent patient care. I only found that out later when I did research online. If I had known that information going in, I would have fought much harder to find an alternative. Always research a facility before your loved one is admitted. Look up lawsuits, state inspection records, and patient reviews. That 5 minutes of research could save a life. The first nurse assigned to my mother was pleasant and professional. She monitored the wound carefully and kept the wound VAC clean and functioning. When that nurse moved to another patient, however, things changed significantly. The next nurse, her name was Lindsay, was not pleasant to deal with. She was tolerable to my mother on the surface, but her attitude with the family was cold and dismissive. And then she said something that I have never forgotten. She admitted, plainly and without any apparent shame, that the only reason she came to work was for the paycheck. She had no other reason. She didn't care about the patients. She didn't have any compassion driving her. Just money. I was told by someone familiar with the nursing home industry that when nurses end up working in nursing homes, it is often because they could not get positions elsewhere. This is a generalization, and there are wonderful people who choose nursing home work because they genuinely care. But it is a reality that families need to be aware of. Not every person working in that building is there because they love caring for the elderly. Chapter 6. When staff put their paycheck over their patients. Lindsay monitored the wound and kept things moving along well enough that my mother's follow-up appointment with Dr. Blavatsky showed the wound was healing. Progress was being made. Then Lindsay was transferred to another patient, and a nurse practitioner named Amber took over. This is where the situation took a dangerous turn. Dr. Blavatsky had given explicit instructions: do not pack the wound unless you hear directly from him. Packing a wound that is healing by secondary intention, meaning it is being allowed to heal from the inside out, can disrupt the healing process significantly. The doctor knew this. He gave clear instructions. Amber saw some bleeding one night, which, as Dr. Blavatsky would later tell us, is normal and expected during wound healing, and she panicked. Without contacting the doctor, without hearing from him as she had been instructed, she packed the wound. At the next appointment, Dr. Blavatsky examined the wound and immediately knew something was wrong. It was not healing the way it should have been. When I told him what had happened, that Amber had packed it, his reaction made the situation very clear. He told us that he had specifically told her not to do that unless she heard from him. By packing the wound without authorization, she had set back the healing process severely. He told us directly that decision had come very close to costing my mother her leg. The doctor told me to go back and tell Amber, do not pack that wound unless you hear from me. If you do, you will be fired. I was given that message to deliver personally because he knew I would make sure it was received. Then there was the night I stayed late watching television in the nursing home common room. My mother's wound VAC alarm went off. It was a loud, clear signal that something needed attention. An older nurse was sitting in that room reading her newspaper. She heard the alarm. She did not move. I told her the alarm was going off. She gave me a dirty look. She threw her newspaper down. She begrudgingly walked toward my mother's room. As she entered the room, I heard her say, under her breath, but not under it enough, "Ah, fuck." And then I heard her mutter that fucking asshole had to disturb me while I was reading my newspaper. I told my mother what I had heard. That nurse was removed from her case immediately. Chapter 7. Standing Your Ground, How I Fought Back. Throughout this experience, I had to learn very quickly that no one in these facilities was going to fight for my mother the way her family would. The system is not designed to advocate for individual patients. It is designed to process people, and if you do not push back, you get swept along. There were several key moments where I directly intervened and made a difference. When the wrong medication was being administered, I questioned it. When a nurse was ignoring her responsibilities to talk on the phone, I reported it. When a doctor wanted to amputate my mother's leg, I said hell no, and so did my brother and sister. When a wound VAC alarm was being ignored, I insisted it be addressed. None of these interventions made me popular with the staff. I was told by a doctor that I was the only problem they had. I was given dirty looks. People who were supposed to be professionals acted like my involvement was an inconvenience rather than a right. Let me be absolutely clear, as a family member, and especially as a person with medical and financial power of attorney, you have every right to be involved in your loved one's care. You have the right to ask questions, to refuse procedures, to request new nurses, and to demand that instructions from attending physicians are followed. Do not let anyone make you feel otherwise. Protect yourself with documentation. Keep a daily written log of everything that happens. Who came into the room? What medications were given? What was said by doctors and nurses? Date and time every entry. If something goes wrong, this log is your evidence. Get medical power of attorney early before a crisis hits. This document gives you the legal authority to make medical decisions for your loved one if they are unable to make them for themselves. Without it, you may be legally powerless even if you are right there in the room. Chapter 8. C. diff colitis, another near-fatal medical mistake. Just when it seemed like the wound situation was under control and my mother might be heading toward discharge, another crisis emerged, one that was directly caused by a medication that had been prescribed by a local doctor. A doctor here in Butte, Dr. Yates, prescribed my mother a very powerful antibiotic. They did warn us that one of the potential side effects was Clostridium difficile colitis, C. diff, a severe bacterial infection of the colon that is caused when antibiotics wipe out the healthy gut bacteria and allow the C. diff bacteria to take over. The warning turned out to be necessary. She developed C. diff. The symptoms are brutal, uncontrollable diarrhea that comes without warning, often immediately after eating anything, because the gut bacteria that normally regulate digestion have been destroyed. Everything you eat passes through you almost immediately. It is humiliating, debilitating, and in vulnerable patients, potentially fatal. The infection specialists tried several treatment approaches, but nothing was clearing it up. My mother was stuck. She couldn't leave the nursing home because of the C. diff, and the C. diff wasn't responding to treatment. Then I remembered something my mother had told me from her years working as a certified nurse's aide. In many cases, the correct dose of a medication for a larger patient is higher than the standard dose. The prescription should take the patient's weight into account. I made the suggestion to the doctor, double the dose of the antibiotic she was already on, based on her weight. They agreed to try it. It worked. The C. diff cleared up. My mother was finally able to go home, and eventually, the home health nurses and therapists who came to the house were professional, caring, and genuinely helpful. My mother's knowledge from her time as a nurse's aide may have saved her life. If we hadn't pushed for that dosage adjustment, the C. diff might have killed her. Advocate for your loved one, even when the doctors look at you like you're out of line for suggesting something. Chapter 9, the glioblastoma, a tumor the size of a grapefruit. For a couple of years after all of that, things were relatively stable. My mother was home. She was seeing her doctors. She was not great, but she was managing. I was her caretaker through the Montana Independent Living Program, so I was at her house regularly and keeping a close eye on her. Then she started falling. At first it seemed like it might be a balance issue or a medication side effect. But then came the headaches so severe that not even her pain medication could touch them. She tried ibuprofen, aspirin, her regular prescriptions. Nothing helped. On several occasions when I arrived at her house in the morning, I found a foam around her mouth. We couldn't explain it at the time, but after she passed away, doctors told us they believed she had been having seizures and that her pain medication had likely been masking the symptoms of the tumor for quite some time. One morning she got up to walk and her foot was completely turned outward, rotated in a way that made no anatomical sense, as if the signals between her brain and her body were no longer communicating correctly. She had no idea it was turned wrong. She thought she was walking normally. We went to the emergency room. Because she had old surgical staples in her neck from a surgery years before, they could not do an MRI, the metal would interfere. They performed a CT scan instead, and what they found stopped us all cold. There was a tumor in her brain. It was as big as a grapefruit. A tumor the size of a grapefruit. And for months, the emergency room had been telling us everything was fine. I had specifically asked them to do a head CT. The lesson: if your gut tells you something is wrong, push for the tests. Do not accept everything looks okay if it doesn't feel okay. She was immediately life-flighted to a hospital in Missoula, Montana, where there were specialists equipped to handle this kind of case. Chapter 10, life-flighted to Missoula, facing the worst news. When your loved one is life-flighted, everything changes instantly. The helicopter, the urgency, the terrifying speed of it all, and then the hours of waiting while doctors in another city assess what's happening and figure out what can be done. Me, my brother, my sister, and my brother's girlfriend all made the trip to Missoula. We stayed at St. Patrick's House, a place that provides shelter and support for the families of patients going through serious medical situations. We were there for a month and a half. In Missoula, the doctors were able to perform an MRI using a specialized protocol that filtered out the interference from the metal in her neck. That MRI confirmed what the CT had suggested. She had a glioblastoma, one of the most aggressive and deadly forms of brain cancer that exists. The tumor had grown to enormous size, and it had been growing for a long time. They needed to perform a biopsy, to go in surgically and take a sample to confirm the diagnosis, and then, if possible, to remove as much of the tumor as they safely could. The doctor assigned to her case was not a compassionate man. I understand that doctors who deal with cases like this develop a kind of distance, a professional detachment that helps them function in an impossibly difficult specialty. But there is a difference between being professional and being cold. When our family expressed hope that things might be okay, that the surgery might fix things, that treatment might work, this doctor essentially told us we were living in a dream world. In those exact terms. There is a right way and a wrong way to tell a family that their loved one is dying. You're living in a dream world is not the right way. Families deserve honesty delivered with compassion, not contempt. After the surgery, the doctor came out shaking his head. My heart nearly stopped. He told us they had gotten most of the tumor out, but not all of it. Removing what remained would have damaged the motor functions of her brain. He told us to go home, enjoy the time we had left with her, and make funeral arrangements. Chapter 11, The Surgery and the Shattering Truth. A glioblastoma is not like most tumors. It is not a solid mass that can simply be removed and the problem is gone. A glioblastoma grows tendrils, microscopic threads of cancer that infiltrate the surrounding brain tissue like roots. You cannot cut all of those out without destroying the brain in the process. That is why, even when surgeons successfully remove the bulk of the tumor, it comes back. We did not want to accept that. We still had hope. We asked about radiation and chemotherapy, and the doctors agreed that these could potentially help. They might slow the growth, or in rare cases, provide more time. We told ourselves that if the cancer responded to treatment, maybe things would be different for her. She stayed in the hospital in Missoula for a few more days while we made arrangements. She wanted to come home, she wanted to be near her children. And because she was a larger person and had specific care needs, she decided to go to a rehabilitation center in Butte rather than try to manage entirely at home. We thought we were making a reasonable, safe choice. We did not know that we were walking her back into the worst facility in town. She began her radiation and chemotherapy appointments from there. For a time, it seemed like there was still a path forward. Then they discovered that 6 new tumors had formed, layered on top of the original tumor site, on top of each other. The doctors told us there was nothing more they could do. The treatment wasn't working, and given the location and number of tumors, there was no surgical option remaining. A glioblastoma progresses until the tumor tissue eventually reaches the part of the brain that controls the most basic functions, including breathing. When that happens, the brain loses the ability to send the signal to breathe. The person essentially suffocates, not because their lungs have failed, but because the command to breathe no longer gets through. There are no words adequate enough to describe receiving that information about someone you love. Chapter 12, Back at Genesis, the worst nursing home in town. Genesis Nursing Home, the same facility she had been in during her first stay for the knee, was now her long-term residence. And if the first stay had been bad in certain respects, this stay was far worse, because this time she was not going to be getting better and going home. This time, she was declining. The head nurse, I will be straightforward, she was the most abrasive, difficult person I encountered in this entire experience. There were moments when she could do her job properly, she made sure medications were administered, but her manner with patients and families was harsh, demanding, and at times outright callous. The neglect we witnessed from the CNAs and nursing staff was systematic. My mother would need to use the bathroom, and no one would come for an hour. An hour. For a grown woman who had any dignity left in the world, having to wait an hour for basic bathroom assistance is a humiliation that I cannot adequately describe. I personally caught nurses' aides hiding in empty patient rooms with no patients in them, to avoid answering call lights. They were hiding, while people who needed help sat in their rooms waiting. I made a complaint to administration. Nothing happened. After my mother passed, one of those CNAs actually admitted to me that they had been part of that problem. The food was inadequate. For a facility supposedly providing nutritional care to vulnerable patients, what they served was minimal, low quality, and often closer to junk food than to balanced meals. This is common in for-profit nursing homes, where cutting costs on food directly increases the bottom line. I believe, and the medical records support this concern, that my mother was not being brought down to meals consistently. Her records noted that she was in an anorexic condition at the time of her death. She had never been anorexic in her life. She had always been a heavy-set woman. The only explanation I have for that notation is that she was not being fed adequately while in their care. Chapter 13, 6 Tumors. No more treatment. When the scan showed 6 tumors stacked on top of one another, on top of the original tumor site, and the doctors told us that further treatment was no longer an option, our family had to accept something that no family wants to accept. She was taken off physical therapy. There was no longer a goal of recovery, the goal had shifted to comfort. One of the nurses at the facility even told us we should consider taking her home. I think they wanted to be rid of the responsibility, to be honest, but for my mother, with the need she had and the progression of her illness, going home was not safe. One of the things that happened in this phase was that my mother began to have moments of confusion. She would believe she was at home when she was not. The surgery and the tumor's progression were affecting her cognition. However, she still had periods of clear, rational thought, and during one of those periods, I had a very important conversation with her. I sat with her in her room. It was a hard night. I asked her, gently, if she wanted us to request a do not resuscitate order, a DNR. She understood what that meant. She thought about it. And she said yes. That was her decision, made in her own mind, in her own words. I made sure it was documented. Having power of attorney meant that I could legally ensure her wishes were respected. There was a night nurse there named Katie Spencer. I had gone to ask for her help with something related to my mother's care. Her response was to slam her hand down on the desk, a clear expression of frustration and irritation at being asked to do her job. A night nurse. In a nursing home. Visibly angry because a patient's family member asked for assistance. These are the people who are with your loved one in the dark, in the middle of the night, when no family is there. That thought has stayed with me. Chapter 14, The Final Days, Hospice, Neglect, and Goodbye. When the decision was made to move my mother to hospice care, I had to sign paperwork. As her power of attorney, that authority came to me. I agreed because it seemed like the most compassionate option at that stage of her illness. I did not fully understand what I was agreeing to. Once she was under hospice care, the hospice organization had a degree of authority over her treatment decisions. When her condition declined sharply and we asked whether she could be transferred to a hospital to receive additional help, any additional help, we were told no. Hospice, by its nature, is comfort-focused, not treatment-focused. Once you sign that paperwork, the system is oriented toward a peaceful death, not toward intervention. Do not put your loved one on hospice unless it is absolutely, undeniably necessary, and you are certain there are no more treatment options. Once you sign, your ability to fight for additional medical care is significantly restricted. I did not know this until it was too late. They kept her in what I was told was a medically managed, sedated state. An induced coma, essentially. I made the decision to tell them to take her off of that sedation. I wanted her to have a chance, any chance, to be present in her final days. Whether that was the right call or not, I will never know for certain. But it was my call to make, and I made it out of love. My mother passed away on December 19th at 9:14 p.m. 13 days after her birthday. She was 76 years old. Because of our financial circumstances, we had to have her cremated. This was not what we would have chosen given our religious beliefs. It went against what we had always understood to be appropriate. I carried that guilt for years. I spoke to a Catholic priest about it, and he was kind enough to explain that the Church's position has evolved, that cremation is understood to be acceptable in circumstances where burial is not financially possible. Almost 9 years have passed now. I have had a long time to think about what I could have done differently, what I should have pushed harder on, what I let go of too easily. And I have come, finally, to a place of acceptance. I did everything I could with what I had. I was there every day. I fought every fight I could see. That has to be enough. Chapter 15. Know your rights as a patient and family member. One of the most powerful things you can do when a loved one enters a hospital or nursing home is to know exactly what rights they have, and what rights you have as their family member and advocate. Most people do not know these rights, and the facilities are not going to volunteer to tell you. The right to be informed about treatment and to refuse any treatment. The right to choose or refuse a transfer to another facility, including a nursing home. The right to know the names and qualifications of everyone providing care. The right to privacy and dignity at all times. The right to file a complaint without fear of retaliation. The right to have a family member or advocate present during medical discussions. The right to see your medical records at any time. The right to appeal any discharge or transfer decision. The right to be free from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The right to have the facility follow physician orders exactly as written. If a CNA, nurse, or administrator tells you or your loved one that they must do something, transfer somewhere, stop a particular treatment, accept a procedure, ask for that in writing, with a full explanation of the legal basis. If they cannot provide it, it may not be required. Chapter 16. How to research hospitals and nursing homes. Before your loved one goes into any facility, whether it is a hospital, a rehabilitation center, or a nursing home, do your homework. This research takes about an hour and could make an enormous difference. Medicare's Nursing Home Compare. Visit Medicare.gov and use the Nursing Home Compare tool. Every Medicare and Medicaid certified facility is rated and inspected. You can see deficiencies, inspection reports, and staffing data all in one place. State Health Department records. Every state maintains public records of inspections and violations for licensed healthcare facilities. Search your state nursing home inspection records to find your state's portal. Court records and lawsuits. Search the facility name along with words like lawsuit, negligence, or settlement in Google or your state's court records database. Genesis, for example, has been sued multiple times, information that is entirely public and that I only found after my mother was already admitted. Online reviews, with caution, sites like Yelp, Google Reviews, and Caring.com have patient and family reviews. Take these with appropriate skepticism, but patterns of similar complaints are meaningful. Visit in person, unannounced if possible. Visit the facility unannounced before admission. Walk the halls. Observe how staff interact with residents. Look at whether call lights are answered promptly. Note whether the facility smells clean. Ask questions. Chapter 17. Power of Attorney, your most important tool. If there is one single thing I can urge every reader of this book to do, it is this: get power of attorney for your loved one before you need it. Do it now, while everyone is still healthy and clear-minded, because once a crisis hits, it may be too late. There are two types you need to understand. Medical power of attorney gives you the legal authority to make healthcare decisions for your loved one if they are unable to make those decisions themselves. Financial power of attorney gives you the authority to manage their finances, pay their bills, and handle their accounts. Both are critically important. When I had both forms of power of attorney for my mother, it changed the entire dynamic with the medical and administrative staff at these facilities. They could not make major decisions without going through me. They had to consult me. They had to get my agreement. Some of them did not like it, but it meant my mother had someone in her corner at every stage. I went to the bank she used in Missoula and had the financial power of attorney arranged right there, during the crisis. It was harder than it needed to be. Do it now, with a local attorney or through a notarized form, before you are in a hospital waiting room trying to figure out who has authority over what. How to get power of attorney: contact a local estate planning attorney. Many offer flat fee services for basic POA documents. Legal aid organizations often provide these services free or at reduced cost for low-income families. Some states also have free POA forms available online through their government websites. Chapter 18, Red Flags Every Family Must Know. Based on everything my family experienced, I have put together a list of warning signs that should tell you something is seriously wrong with a facility or with the care your loved one is receiving. Staff do not answer call lights within a reasonable time, 15 to 20 minutes maximum. You find staff in empty rooms, break areas, or personal calls when patients need assistance. Nurses or aides express that they are only there for the paycheck. Your loved one is not brought to meals consistently. Medical staff deviate from physician orders without contacting the doctor first. Your loved one cannot sleep due to noise, room assignments, or constant interruptions. Staff seem irritated or hostile when family members ask questions. Wound care or medical device alarms are not responded to promptly. The facility smells strongly of urine or waste, a sign of chronic understaffing. Administration dismisses your complaints or takes no visible action. Your loved one seems afraid, anxious, or unable to speak freely around certain staff. Medical records show conditions, like weight loss or anorexia, that were not present before admission. If you see multiple items on this list, trust your gut. Ask questions. Make complaints in writing. Contact your state's long-term care ombudsman. And if you can, explore moving your loved one to a different facility. Chapter 19, Don't put them on hospice unless absolutely necessary. This is something I wish someone had sat me down and explained clearly before I signed those hospice papers. I want to be that person for you. Hospice care is a beautiful and compassionate concept when it is used at the right time and for the right reasons. It is designed for people who have a terminal diagnosis and for whom curative treatment is no longer possible or desired, people who want their remaining time to be focused on comfort, dignity, and peace rather than aggressive medical intervention. But here's what I did not fully understand when I signed. Once your loved one is enrolled in hospice, the hospice organization's authority over certain medical decisions can limit your ability to pursue additional treatment. When my mother's condition worsened rapidly and I wanted to explore whether there was anything else that could be done, the hospice program restricted that avenue. The emphasis shifts entirely to comfort, not cure, not even aggressive symptom management in many cases. If your loved one's condition has not been conclusively determined to be terminal with no treatment options remaining, do not sign hospice paperwork. Once you are in that system, getting out and pursuing active treatment is much more difficult. Talk to multiple doctors. Get a second opinion before agreeing to hospice. Ask specifically, are there any treatment options remaining, even if they are experimental or unlikely to succeed? Get the answer in writing. Only when you are completely certain that no further treatment is possible or desired should you consider hospice. Chapter 20, Make final arrangements before you need them. This is a chapter one wish I never had to write, and I suspect it is a chapter you wish you never had to read. But it is one of the most important ones in this book, because the failure to make these arrangements in advance causes suffering on top of grief in a way that is entirely avoidable. When my mother passed, we had not made arrangements in advance. We were not financially prepared. And that placed us in a situation where we had to make very difficult decisions under enormous emotional pressure, with very limited resources and very little time. We ended up having her cremated. Given our religious beliefs, that was not what any of us would have chosen. The guilt over that has lasted years. Almost 9 years later, I am still working through it. A Catholic priest helped me understand that the Church recognizes the reality of financial hardship and does not condemn families for making the choices that their circumstances require. That helped. But it would have helped more to have had a plan in place. What to arrange in advance. Talk to a funeral home before a crisis occurs. Many offer pre-need arrangements that lock in current prices. Determine whether burial or cremation aligns with your family's beliefs and finances. Look into burial assistance programs through your county, state, or religious organization. Have the conversation while there is time. Talk to your loved one about their wishes, for medical care, for end-of-life decisions, and for what happens to their body and their belongings. These conversations are hard. They are also one of the most loving things you can do for each other. Appendix: questions to ask and resources. Questions to ask before any hospital or nursing home admission. Has this facility been cited for violations in the last 3 years? May I see the inspection reports? What is your current staff-to-patient ratio on nights and weekends? Who is the attending physician and how often will they be on site? What is your policy if a patient's condition changes rapidly overnight? How are family members notified when something changes with their loved one's care? Can I speak with the charge nurse directly if I have concerns at any time? What is your complaint process, and who oversees it? Has this facility faced any patient negligence lawsuits in the last 5 years? Resources. Medicare Nursing Home Compare, medicare.gov/care-compare/ provider type =nursing home, target =_ rel =nupener medicare.gov/nursing home compare. Long-term care ombudsman, every state has one, search your state name plus ombudsman. Montana DPHHS Adult Protective Services, 1-800-332-2272. National Patient Advocate Foundation, patientadvocate.org. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, cms.gov. ARP Caregiving Resources, arp.org/caregiving. Eldercare Locator, connects to local services eldercare.acl.gov 1-800-677-1116. National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, nhpco.org. A final word: my mother deserved better. So does yours. So does your father, your spouse, your sibling, your friend. Every person who walks into a hospital or nursing home deserves to be treated with dignity, competence, and genuine human care. The system is imperfect. Some of the people in it are wonderful. There were nurses and doctors who treated my mother with real compassion, and I am grateful for every one of them. But there are also others in that system who have no business being there, people who see patients as burdens, families as problems, and their paycheck is the only reason to show up. You are the only protection your loved one has. Be present. Be loud. Ask questions. Document everything. Know your rights. And never, ever let someone make you feel like advocating for your loved one makes you the problem. Written in loving memory of a mother who deserved so much more. Be present. Ask questions. Document everything. Know your rights.